Leslie Bulion creates award-winning science poetry steeped in hands-on learning experiences, field observations, research, humor, and imagery in a variety of poetic forms. Her illustrated collections invite readers on multi-layered science adventures exploring spiders, birds, sea creatures, insects, amphibians, entire ecosystems, and even human anatomy. Leslie's graduate science background and her years as a school social worker inform both her poetry and her science-infused novels for young readers. She offers lively and engaging author visits worldwide. Becca Stadtlander is an award-winning illustrator and fine artist, inspired by the beauty of everyday objects, the comforts of home, and the lush colors and landscapes of far-off places. She attended the Maryland Institute College of Art and currently lives and works in her hometown of Covington, Kentucky. Her work is featured in children's books, editorial publications, stationery, home decor, book covers, and more. We are so excited to have them both here tonight, so I'm going to pass things off to them and let them get it started.
Okay, thank you so much, Victoria. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you also to Julie and Kendra and Lindsay and everybody at RJ Julia for hosting us and inviting us to launch Serengeti with you. And of course to Peachtree and Holiday House and all the partners for supporting the creation of this book. And I want to thank everyone who's here for being here. We can't see you because it's webinar style, so rats, but we really do appreciate everyone being here. And I want to say that in this time of so many catastrophes, we're hoping that humanity and nature will find a way to coexist. So having said that, I'm going to start out by talking about how this book came about. Years ago, our family was invited to visit East Africa by my husband's sister, Dr. Susan Hirsch, who was there working on a Fulbright fellowship. Among many experiences, the Serengeti left a deep and lasting impression. And I am so thankful to the Connecticut Shoreline SCBWI members who I had only just met before I went to East Africa for encouraging me to bring a journal along. This journal is only the second journal I ever kept in my life. And to me, it's interesting that the first one was when I spent a semester at sea, because the Serengeti gave me that same feeling that I get when I go out to sea, that sort of heart-filling wonder of this vast expanse that is teeming with life, and so much of it you can't even see. So I thought that that was a great connection. And I thought that I'm going to share my screen and share some of the photos from my, let's see. I'm going to have to back out of this for a second. For some reason. Uh-oh. There we are. I thought I lost my Zoom. I'm not getting the option to share my... Sorry, everybody. This is just going to take me a second. I don't know why this is... Maybe it's because the PowerPoint was open. I'll try again. I'm only getting my desktop.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything of yours yet, Leslie.
Yeah. I don't know why. Let's see if I can figure this out. Okay. How about now?
No, not yet.
I'm not sure if we have... Victoria, do you have any ideas about what
Yeah, is it not working when you hit share screen?
Yeah, I'm just getting an option for sharing my desktop, but not actually the presentation.
Huh.
Let me try one
Let's
more
see.
time.
Yeah.
Still no? You're still seeing me?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. And we even tested this beforehand. So, all right. Do you think maybe it's if both of us were up there? Let's try that again. Well, I'm going to try one more thing. How about now?
Still not seeing anything. How weird.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm just gonna check the settings.
Hmm. I'm going to try something in my setup and see if this changes it. Let's see if this works.
Ah,
Now you see my desktop?
I see your desktop. Yeah.
Okay, I think we'll get to it this way
Okay.
then. Oh my goodness. Okay, we're doing all right here?
Okay, I think we got it.
Yeah, I just need to have this part go away so I can start the slideshow. Sharing. Well, we have a patient audience here, I can tell.
I think everybody's used to this sort of thing happening.
Yeah,
It's part of
suppose.
the
Well, this
Zoom
is-
world we're living in.
Let's see if I can just move this down. Okay. Slideshow, play from start. Okay. How's
Perfect.
that? All right, so let's rewind all of that empty space and go back to where we were. So this is an excerpt from my journal that I'm going to read along with showing you the slides. We have spent 2 days and a lifetime in Serengeti, an ocean of grass. The gazelles swim with their heads above the waves. Even a buffalo, whoops, or a wildebeest can lie down under the grasses. I want to just walk and keep walking through the grasses with the beautiful animals. I'd love to see it more slowly, more completely. Not the whole place complete, but each blade of grass itself, each flower, each mouse. We spent 2 days and a lifetime in Serengeti. My dreams for a long time will be of Serengeti. So much to see, so much to know, endlessly alive on every level. I'll sleep tonight and dream of gazelles springing across the plain. I'll see the brown grasses waving and shimmering in the late afternoon light, and my heart will be full of Serengeti. Now I've returned to the Serengeti with my research mind and my poetry heart to explore this ecosystem with incredible illustrator Becca Stadtlander. In this moving ecosystem, I use the rhythms of the Serengeti, the seasons and rains bringing migrating herds into and out of the short grass plain, as they interact with the resident animals, and the movement of food energy from grass to herbivore to insectivore to carnivore to dung and back again. The book begins with the story of the seasonal migration and an explanation of all of that called Serengeti, an Ecosystem in Motion. My poetic form was inspired by the traditional Swahili utendi, a 4-line stanza using partial rhyme and a refrain, a repeat. In this case, the 4th line of each stanza ends with the word grass, which is the basis of this open plain ecosystem. Each stanza connects to the next as we move through the food web. I include spare expository notes, and spare often being the biggest challenge for me, to deepen what I've shared in my reverential poem. I use science notes to give further information, and I'm going to share the wildebeest page to show an example of how I use the science notes. Later, when I read through, I'm going to read through just the poem, and the science notes will be on the page, but those will be for going back and reading another time. So this stanza, wildebeests feast on shorter swards, oxpecker birds are stowaboards, gnus trample roots in shaggy herds, spreading manure for growing grass. So one of the science notes right here says a sward is an area of grass. This one says wildebeests use their wide mouths to graze on short, tender grasses. They chew, swallow, spit up, then slowly chew their food a second time to get the nutrients they need. This one, red-billed oxpeckers hitch rides on wildebeests, also called gnus, it's GNU, and other large plant-eating mammals. These cardinal-sized birds are known to pick ticks and other bothersome insects from the skin of their hosts. But oxpeckers also help themselves to sips of their host's blood by picking at open wounds. So I want to say that I am especially thrilled with the trim size of this book because it gives Becca's artwork its full impact, each spread sort of embodying that vastness of this remarkable place. So I'm going to stop the screen share now, and I'm going to turn it over to Becca, who's going to talk about her amazing artwork.
Well, I am not kidding when I say this is one of my favorite books I've ever illustrated. I think that when I got this job, I had just come off of doing, I want to say, 5 or 6 historical biographies in a row. And I'm not complaining. I love a historical biography, but they can be very tedious. There's a lot of research. I mean, there's a lot of research with any book, but they're difficult. There's people's portraits, there's all sorts of clothing, historical facts that you have to get correct. And I was really burned out doing that. And I said, I'm not going to do another one. I'm not going to do another one. And I got the offer to do this, and I just immediately jumped on it, and I was so excited. So I think what I wanted to talk about when I talk about the art for this book is, I think my enthusiasm about, you know, all the color and all of the shape and all the movement I could create with this animal landscape Serengeti scene got me really excited about using a new medium. And I had gotten these flat pressed pastels. They're in a plastic container like this, but they're just chalk pastel that's been pressed into, it looks like a giant watercolor. But I had just gotten these, and I was thinking, oh, I want to use these for a book, but I didn't know what would be a good choice. And when this Serengeti book came along, I thought that will be perfect to use those. So they apply with makeup sponges because they're kind of similar to like a powder product. So here's, this is a dirty sponge, but that's how I was able to get that sort of airbrush texture in the artwork. And I just went to town on it because I love that medium so much. And I really felt like it was able to express just different textures of grass, of sky, of air. I'm obsessed with texture and with color, and that is, I mean, what I was so thrilled about doing this book. I'm going to show just a few originals since people don't normally get to see them, but here's a double page spread. I just did it in the same format it would be in the book, so I could see how it would be laid out. But here you can really see the cheetah, how that pastel texture is achieved. It's sort of, I can't describe it other than it reminds me of, I don't know, airbrushing, but I just absolutely love the way it looked. But yeah, here's the cheetah spread. And here's an example of a sketch to final. Here's my sketches. I do them on just regular computer paper. And for a book that has double page spreads, I normally will sketch on 2 pieces of paper and just sort of tape them together for the scan. But this is another one of my favorites in the book is the dung beetle. So this is the sketch. It's just a plain pencil sketch. And then I lightbox the sketch onto the watercolor paper I'm going to use. So I essentially trace my own sketch with light underneath it. And then I'm able to apply the color and the paint to the final drawing. And I can see exactly where everything is going to go because I can't afford to mess up with a final painting. Here's the original of the dung beetle. So this is all that pastel, and then it has gouache paint, which is for people that don't know, it's sort of an acrylic based watercolor that's completely opaque. So you can work with it like watercolor and have it be really thin and washy, and you can also get it to be really solid and really, really vivid. Here's another one of my favorite spreads with a neon sun. So I got to use some neon colors, neon colored paint, which I never ever get to use, and I thought how appropriate to use it for this book. This is my paint. It's the Holbein acrylic wash is what I use. And then, yeah, I'll show a couple more originals. Here's another double page spread. So you can see I just do the final the exact way I do the sketch, so I know exactly where the text is going to be laid out. So I end up doing the sketches, and then I have to move a lot of things around to make sure that there's room for all the words and that everything is readable. But I still want the art to exist beautifully without any text. So I always have to imagine, what is this going to look like without words on the page? And I want it to still be a successful piece of art. And here's another one of my favorites. This is the last original I'll show, but it's the Aardvark. But yeah, that's sort of how I work, and for this book at least. And I don't know, I'm really happy with the art that I did for this book. I've never been to the Serengeti. It was for me, it was just a lot of Google image search and making things up and hoping that I captured the essence of what Leslie saw and that I interpreted her poetry the way she wanted it interpreted, because I feel like that's really important to make sure that the author is happy with what you do and that it's what they dreamed. So yeah, I think that's it for me. But yeah, Leslie.
Okay. Thank you, Becca. It is so fascinating to see this. And I'll say what I said right before we started for the rest of the participants. Becca and I have never met until right now. So we've never spoken, we've never seen each other live, just, you know, I stalk Becca's artwork online because it's so beautiful. And I'm so honored by everything that you did in this book. You know, when you say you want it to be what an author imagines, like, I can't imagine this. Your imagination is magic to me, and just so incredibly thrilled. It is just a gorgeous, gorgeous artwork.
Well, I remember asking the publisher when they asked if I wanted to do this, I said, can I please do whatever I want? Because I wanted to make sure that I could, you know, do big sweeping shapes and, you know, all this crazy stuff I had in my head. And they said, go for it.
Yeah.
Because I just was
happy.
so bummed out by all of the tight things and things I had to keep in mind with doing these biography books. Like I said, that I love doing, but this was just a real dream project for me.
Well, I'm so happy that we did this together, and it is just, to me, it's a masterpiece, really. The artwork is a masterpiece. So I'm going to now go back to screen sharing, and I'm going to read stanzas of the poem and share some of the spreads. So I'll go back to screen sharing. Now I think we're going to be A-okay. So now I'm back to the cover of the book, the beautiful cover with the zebras and the moving grasses. There's so much movement to me in the artwork. It really encapsulates so much of that feeling of being in the Serengeti. So, whoops. Here's the first spread. Parched soil bed of volcano ash, roots asleep in a tangled mesh. One drop, two, then downpours rush. First rains wake new blades of grass. Hoofbeats thunder under blazing sun, a great migration toward the plain. Grazing zebras first to begin, clear away taller, tougher grass. Wildebeests feast on shorter swards. Oxpecker birds are stow-aboards. Gnu's trample roots in shaggy herds, spreading manure for growing grass. Plains are cropped where wildebeests grazed, leaving tender herbs exposed. Low ground growth is nimbly used. Fleet gazelles nibble new mown grass. Acacia leaf buds brush the sky. Thorns stand guard, warn, keep away. Lithe rugged tongues let giraffes enjoy, chewing cud, stilt walking through the grass. Bathed by rain, Serengeti blooms, sun-faced yellows and scarlet flames, waste paper flowers on tiny stems scattered as handfuls across the grass. Butterflies flutter at nectar wells, whistling thorns host ant patrols, hoofed herds stir up grasshopper gales, cattle egrets feast above the grass. Ancient boulder heaps mark the plains. Koppies shelter Hyrax clans. Koppies are piles of boulders that emerge after weathering. Rock rabbits gobble freshest greens, dart home from perilous open grass. Koppies shadow moon-washed night. Dik-diks pair in a life duet. Hind-legged stretch for leaves and fruit. Elfin hiders in the grass. Mating termites ride the wind, nest, then chew chaff underground. Workers raise mounds of clay and sand. Towers sail in a sea of grass. Mounds are breached by spade-clawed swipe. Aardvark's tongue is a termite scoop. Trot to burrow as sun comes up, thick tail trailing, bending grass. Oop, there we are. Abandoned mound under night's dark wing. Dawn uncoils with a flickering tongue. Hyrax flees from poison fang. Mamba wins through whispering grass. Stalk-legged raptor, keen-eyed stroll, scans for scurry, slither, or crawl. Secretary bird wields claw and bill. Mamba whips from cloak of grass. Daring jackals, sly and fast, scavenge, hunt, and rarely rest. Frogs, fruit, carrion, no meal missed. Dik-dik fawn hides in the grass. Gazelle herds grazing, striped tails flick. Tense, alert to cheetah's mark. Patient predator built to streak. Dappled earth patches in tawny grass. Hang-gliding vultures, mid-air dives. Cackling scrum lures hyena thieves. Strong jaws leave only horns and hooves. Hungry cheetah fades into grass. Plains rolled clean of animal scat, buried in tunneled nesting spot. Aerating soil and feeding root, dung beetle tills its garden of grass. Monsoon winds shift, plains grazing is done. Herds move westward once again. Columns swell, drawn to distant rain, weaving like smoke through stone dry grass. Hoofprints linger in sleeping grass. In the back, as with all my books, we added back matter. There's a note about the poetry form, the Utendi, and why I chose that. There are suggestions for further reading about the area. There's Becca's beautiful hand-drawn map, placing where we are in the world and then where we are in the Serengeti Maro ecosystem and following the migration in its, well, it's not quite circular route. And of course it meanders and changes a bit from year to year. And then some organizations that work hard to promote conservation and empowering local populations and trying to keep this to help local and indigenous people to conserve and protect Serengeti. And we have a glossary. And I truly hope that readers will enjoy joining us on this journey. And with that, I think I can stop my screen share, and I'm sure both of us would be happy to take questions.
Okay, so we do have some audience questions, and I just want to remind everyone that if you do have any questions, you can ask them using the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen, but we will jump right in. When looking to become an author, is it possible to also be the illustrator? Beautiful work, by the way.
Absolutely. It's definitely possible to be the author and the illustrator. It's something that I would like to do with my career eventually, but I personally don't know if it's in the cards for me, just because I don't, I'm a self-conscious writer, but yeah, it's absolutely possible. A lot of illustrators start out doing illustration, and then they'll move into, once they're established as an illustrator, they'll move into writing and illustrating. It's kind of like the ultimate thing you can do with your career as an illustrator, is to be an author and illustrator.
And I would never be an illustrator. But I do, you know, I show, I don't know if I have one of my other journals handy, but I do show kids that even though I'm not an illustrator, I do sketch things in my journals, because it helps me as I'm writing to see how critters are kind of put together and get a sense of that. I take lots of photographs. I suppose someday I could photo illustrate something if I could plan ahead that far. But I'm thrilled to have Becca illustrate these books, and I've worked with other wonderful illustrators too, and I rely on them to really use that sort of incredible imagination to and unbelievable talent to do the things that they do.
Okay. Leslie, were there other tricks beyond your journal and your photographs that you used to bring back the sensory details you needed to write your poems?
Well, if you want to call it a trick, I think, all authors, especially if you're writing, this is basically nonfiction. So if you're writing nonfiction, you do tons and tons and tons of research. And I do all kinds of research. I read guidebooks, I read giant textbooks, I read picture books, but I also read novels that are set in the area that I'm writing about, because then I can connect with the emotions of other authors who are either from the area or have been in the area and are writing about the area and thinking and feeling all of the things that happen in the area. So I think I find that really helpful, just to sort of reconnect with those feelings. But I will say that I wrote in my journals, probably 5 to 8 times a day. It wasn't as if I just sat down at the end of the day and recorded the things that had happened. I was everywhere. We were in a Land Rover on safari, and I'm bumping along, taking notes and writing down everything everybody said to me, so that I could really have that memory of what happened. And I still do. When I go back and read it, I remember all these years later when people said what and how it felt to be there. And I'm very, very thankful that I was able to keep those journals and pay attention that way. And now I try to do that. I certainly do it all the time when I travel. I'm not as good about it at home, keeping journals, but yeah.
Okay. Becca, when you illustrated this book, did you do it page by page, or did you start with the scenes you could visualize most clearly?
For this book, I went in chronological order, page by page. I don't normally do that, but sometimes I feel like doing that, you can run yourself into a situation where you're getting like exhausted, and then by the end of the book you don't like the illustrations as much as you did at the beginning when you were like so excited about starting it, because you get to a point where you're like, oh, I want to be done with this project, as enjoyable as it can be, and that can happen, but I felt like with this project, I was so enthusiastic about it that I was comfortable doing it chronologically.
Okay, so we have just a few comments that I think are nice, and I'm going to mention. The artwork is beautiful, great collaboration, beautiful text, gorgeous illustrations. Just wanted to mention those. Okay, so our next question is, what is your research process like?
Is that for me or for Leslie?
Could be for either.
Oh, well, mine is going on usually Google Image, or going through. I like to source old photographs as much as I can to get photos that might not exist the first time you're searching for person drinking a glass of water or whatever you're searching for, but with this book I just tried to collect, I don't know, for each spread there's probably 200 to 300 images that I gathered from online, because you really need to, without being somewhere, you need to be able to understand what something looks like without straight up copying it. So to have 30, 40 photos of an aardvark and what an aardvark looks like from all different angles is the best way of being able for me to come up with the spread successfully and have it be something that came out of me instead of me just copying a photo. But I mean, I spend probably a week just pulling images. And then I have folders on my computer that'll say, for this book, it'll be, dung beetle and cheetah and giraffe for every spread. And then it has all the photos just for that particular spread that I need to look at. And I'll usually open them all up on my screen. And that helps me when I'm coming up with the initial sketch to look at like 50 different versions of a giraffe or of a dung beetle or whatever.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, I have a question for you before I answer my research. Do you ever use videos? Look at videos?
Sometimes I do if I can't find a photo. It didn't apply for this, but I also take photos of myself, of if I have to do, I don't know, a hand at a particular angle or something. I've taken photos of my husband before for things, but it's pretty much however I can get the image. But I have looked up videos before. I can't remember what it was for, but if I can't find enough imagery, I will do that.
Hmm. I sometimes use videos when I'm writing about a critter to see how it moves. And then it sort of sparks my thinking of what words I can use to describe its motion. So it's interesting. So, for my research, with every book, I always try to have some kind of hands-on experience. Lately, all the books that I've been doing, I have the hands-on experience with the idea that I'm going to be writing about this. I had no idea when I was in the Serengeti that I was going to write a book about it. I just wanted to record every bit of the experience. So I did it with, hundreds of photographs. It was before digital, so it wasn't thousands and thousands of photographs. It was more like hundreds of photographs because it was canisters of film. But I did collect my experiences that way, but now I always try to have some kinds of hands-on experience, and then I do kind of a wide reading about a subject, and I did that for this too. I read books about herbivore-based ecosystems and herbivore ecology, and lots of books about the Serengeti. And then when I chose which animals were going to sort of represent that level of the food web, then I did sort of a deep dive into the specific, like reading all about cheetahs. And, I chose cheetah instead of lion as the apex predator. There were so many animals in the Serengeti, it could be a really long book, but I tried to just choose representative animals and some plants. And so I did a deeper dive into those with lots and lots of reading scientific papers. And I had conversations with our guide while we were in Serengeti. And then I always send my work to an expert scientist or somebody who knows the area to check my work. So that was my process.
Okay. Leslie, what are some of your favorite books growing up or now? And Becca, that question can go to you too.
Okay. Favorites questions are super hard for me. So either this is somebody who doesn't know me or somebody who really wants to challenge me. But I will say that in terms of poetry, that actually is an easy question for me in terms of poetry, because I was exposed to poetry quite young by A.A. Milne's books when we were very young, and Now We Are Six, which are still two of my favorites of all time. And they have everything that I love in poetry in them. I love, everything about poetry, but there's a lot of rhythm. There's a lot of rhyme. It's not all, but a lot. And there's humor, there's wordplay, and then there's emotion mixed in with all of that. So I love those. Now, in terms of children's books, I can't name favorites. I have so many, and so many of my friends are children's authors that I cannot pick favorite friends, so I don't. I'll pass that off to you, Becca.
I wish I could, I have a desktop. I wish I could turn the screen so you could see my shelf of all my hundreds and hundreds of books that I have. But growing up, two books that stand out in my head, one I'm looking at right now, Carol, grab it. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of this book, but I loved this book. It's kind of just like a fantasy sort of. I also really loved Patricia Polacco's book Thunder Cake, because I was very scared of storms when I was a kid, and that book was given to me. And I really was drawn to the artwork and the illustration in books, even as a kid. That was something that I didn't understand how they got the art to be on the page, and I just loved to look at all the art. So those were some of my favorite books growing up. But I mean, now, gosh, I love this I'm gonna choose things based on illustration, because that's just what I do. So I buy things based on illustration. I love the illustrator Julia Sarda. This is a book that she illustrated about Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. I love her art. I love Carson Ellis. I love her art. I love Christian Robinson. Gosh, there's just so many. I love this book, Another by Christian Robinson. I don't know. I have. There's too many to name, but those are just some that were right beneath me that I could grab.
Those were all great ones. Okay. Did you spend a lot of time talking to Becca about how you wanted the illustrations to look and what kinds of feelings you hoped she could capture?
No, none. We never spoke to each other. We never met. And the way the process works, I write my words or some draft of my words and send them to my editor, and the publishing house decides if they're going to publish it or not. And then it's up to them to find an illustrator, and they will. I've been working with Peachtree for a very long time, and they are so supportive of my work. I can't say enough wonderful things. And because we've worked together so long, or maybe they do this all the time, I don't know, but we do have some, conversation about what kind of look maybe the book could have. And with that, I might send a bunch of illustrators that I think, well, maybe something like this, or maybe something like this. And Peachtree does the same. Everybody is sort of working on it. And then we just sort of mull over those things. And then Peachtree really makes the decision of who is going to get the offer. And I think Peachtree suggested Becca, and when I saw her work, and she does have a lot of people in her portfolio, but some just amazing animals. I think of those dancing cranes. I was like, I saw the dancing cranes and I said, yes, that's it. That looks wonderful. And so I was thrilled when she accepted that. But then I know I said a lot of times, Becca can use her artistic ability and imagination much more than I can imagine any of this. So when I see something, I can say, well, maybe it wouldn't be that way, or although I don't really remember doing that with this book, but maybe we could have this and one more animal in this spread or something like that. But mostly it was just everything was so beautiful, and really her take on all of these things were just right. So, but so when I make a comment, it goes to my editor. She talks to the art director about it. They make a decision about whether that gets passed along, or whether they agree with me, or whether they want it sparks some other, because you're always like, well, what somebody says doesn't have to be the definitive word. It's a collaboration between all of us at this point. So it might make somebody else think, oh, well, maybe it's not going to be what Leslie said, but that makes me think, how about this? And so, everybody's ideas sort of jump off each other, but not directly me to Becca.
Yeah.
Goes through
a lot of people involved.
Yeah, there's a lot of people involved.
And there's a lot of people you have to go through to follow the protocol of, how changes are made. And but yeah, the art director is heavily involved in making sure, what I do is correct to the science and the reality of it. But yeah, I'd say I haven't had a lot of projects where the author is like doing art direction, or I know that like they chose me, unless I had already worked with them on another book beforehand. But usually like it's just like a blind thing. Like I get an offer from my agency that says, do you want to do this? And then it all comes together. But yeah, it's like it's always nice to connect with an author, but I feel like it always happens more toward, the end of a book rather than the beginning. And I think that can be a good thing for some people, and it just depends.
That is so interesting. I always thought it would be like direct communication. So you learn something new every day. All right, we have time for a few more questions. Leslie mentioned her emotions connecting to other authors' impressions of an area. Can Becca comment on whether she does something similar when creating art? Does she refer to only photo references?
I think that what I said before about, making sure that I have a ton of photo references, it's so that I can come up with it on my own. So it feels like the artwork came from within me and not from me copying a photo. So I'd say in a way that's the same thing as what Leslie does, is that I just interpret it a little bit differently. But I think at this point in my life, I don't second guess my art and say, oh, this is bad. I just do with what I go with my gut on what I think is beautiful, and trust that, my aesthetic is enough to have gotten me this far in my life as an artist. So I trust that. But I feel like everything I do, comes from a place of emotion and poetry and internal, because I don't feel as confident in any other parts of my life as I do with interpreting things into artwork, which is, why I'm an illustrator. I get so much satisfaction from taking something and like bringing it into my world and then spitting it back out again as art, because it feels like it's, a part of me, and the way that it's my choices of how I'm going to paint this moon, or how I'm going to paint this grass or whatever. And I do want you to feel it, to feel the movement and the color and feel the heat of the place. And I can only hope that I, achieve that in other people, but I achieve it for myself and hope that it touches other people in the same way that it touches me, essentially.
I want to add something too, related to this question, that when I read a novel maybe that's set in the Serengeti, if I were writing the novel, about the Serengeti. I wouldn't read somebody else's novel about the Serengeti. I won't read somebody else's poetry about the Serengeti. That's too close. And it just made me think of that when Becca was talking about, how she wants to trust her own interpretation. I really do also want to trust my own emotional connection when I'm writing poetry. I don't want to have somebody else's words come into my head. So if I'm writing a novel, I've been writing science poetry so much now for quite a number of years. I haven't written a novel for a while, but I don't read other kids' novels that could be in any way related to what I'm doing, or even in the same age group when I'm writing my own. And I don't read other people's poetry that, if I'm writing serious poetry, I might read somebody else's funny poetry, but I'm not going to read somebody else's poetry about amphibians when I'm writing a book of poetry about amphibians, because I want all of my words to come from inside me.
All right, and we'll make this the final question. Leslie, when did you decide this was a book worth writing? It totally was, by the way.
Oh, thank you. So this book had actually an interesting provenance in that I did not decide to write this. I thought about the Serengeti for a very long time. And I knew that I wanted to write about it. But at the time, I was actually mostly writing novels. And then I started writing science poetry. And I was writing a fair amount of funny science poetry. And then it was probably 10 or 14 years, 10 or 12 years after we were in the Serengeti, that I think I was reading something about international poetry. And I saw that Swahili, I had a book on Swahili poetry and the Utendi stanza, and something about it was so, it reminds me of haiku in a way that, you can write funny haiku, but a lot of those forms to me lend themselves to more serious thinking or more serious emotion, and this the same. And I just had this idea of putting that all together and worked on it for quite a while, but I only wrote the poetry and none of the science notes, none of the back matter. I wrote this poem and I was like, I'm done. That's it. It's of a piece. And Peachtree was thinking about it for a while, and I knew there was something not quite right. It wasn't enough just to live on its own like that. But at the same time, I had the feeling that you had to read the poem all the way through without any interruptions. The flow of it's the whole idea of one piece to the next of this ecosystem connected. So I just let it sit again for a really long time and didn't do anything with it. And then I thought, I'm writing all these books of poetry with notes, expository notes along with them. Why didn't I ever think of doing that with this one? It was, I don't know, I guess I got sort of in this one way of thinking about it. And when I sort of opened up that thinking, I thought, well, I can write really tiny notes. And maybe there's another way to read it. We just had a review of the book and it said all of these wonderful things. And then, well, when you read it through, if you read everything on the page, there's like a little bump. And I thought, that's right. And so what I suggest for readers is to read, well, I would always read the opening note first because that sets the scene for the whole thing. But then just read the poem all the way through. Look at the spreads, get all of the emotion out of it. Read the poem all the way through. And then go back and read the poem and then the science notes. And that way you get to look at all the illustrations a second time, which is great. And you get to experience all of it, because when you first read the poem, there's some vocabulary in it that, it's good to go back again and see both things, but to read it first with that flow through, I think is really important. And that's what I got stuck on. So I really appreciate that our work on this really made me think about what's the right way to present this. I think I went off on a track. Did that answer the question?
I think it did.
Okay.
All right. So thank you so much to both Leslie and Becca. This has been such a great hour with you two. As always, do not forget to purchase a copy of Serengeti, Plains of Grass. We have links in the chat box that you can click on to purchase, or again, you can come visit us in store. Thank you again, Leslie and Becca, and I hope everyone has a great rest of their night.
Thank you so much.